Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Lou Marciani, Director of the Innovation Institute for Fan Experience, and one of the hosts of this FANCENTRIC podcast. My partner in crime, Jim Mercurio, an IIF Distinguished Fellow and a member of the IIFX Hall of Fame and host of FANCENTRIC. Jim?
Morning, Lou. Thanks so much. We're here to talk a little bit about what FANCENTRIC means to us and what it means to the industry as a whole. And we're the center of everything we do in sports and entertainment kind of comes together as we talk about the fans and their journey. FANCENTRIC is also kind of some of the things that we look at in IIFX with some of the series of articles and podcasts and town halls and live streams that we're about to unveil, where we talk about the three things that are important to me and certainly I think in the industry, but that's people, process, and technologies, and how we can kind of affect the entire fan journey associated with global sports and entertainment industry. So Lou, we're looking forward to getting in it with you today.
Yeah, well, I'm excited that you would partner up with me, and this series will be very exciting for our industry. So welcome to our first live stream on the IIFX YouTube channel. And our first live stream fan-centric podcast series looks at the current issues facing the sports and entertainment industry as they relate to the fan, as Jim said. Jim and I, along with some of the guests, will provide insight, best practices and commentary on these important issues. Today, we'll discuss what's going on with sports and entertainment fan behavior.
Yeah, so let's get into it a little bit and kind of let me introduce you to some of our guests today. Mario COUTINHO, the Vice President of Stadium Operations and Security for the Toronto Blue Jays and Baseball Club. How are you today, Mario? Good to see you.
Thanks, Jim. Great to see both you and Dr. Lou.
Thank you, my man. Dan Donovan, founder and managing partner of Stratoscope, who's in on. We're honored to have him here today. He's working his tail off as he's getting ready for F1 down in Vegas. So Dan, thanks for taking the time today too.
Thanks, Jim.
LINDSAY, a PhD and program director at the University of Pacific. I don't know if that I've told you this before, but that is my alma mater out of Stockton, California. So I'm happy to have you as well. Thank you for joining us today.
Go Tigers. And hi, Dr. Yes, thanks for having me today.
Atta girl. And Darcy Lutenberger, sorry, I just screwed that up, Director of Security at UWMM and the owner of Premier Training Services. So Darcy, it's great to see you again, and thanks for your insight today.
Thanks for having me. It's Darcy Lutzenberger, Mingenberger Burger.
I love it.
Checking in.
Well, listen, welcome everybody, and thanks, Jim. And let's set the stage for our conversation today. I think Chris has a little video for us.
Most of the crowd has stayed here at the Pepsi Center.
That's ridiculous. Now, whoever threw that should be banned from this arena for life.
And apparently they have pointed out.
But it looked like it was a beer, and that's ridiculous. Some of these players can get hurt out here. You can slip. You can tear your knee, an ACL. That's ridiculous. Well, someone next to him needs to call him out. Step up to the plate.
Well, that's just one example. We've had about 5 incidents this year alone so far this season in the NFL. And the NBA just starting to crank up. And I know there's a priority set by the leagues to make sure that the fans are safe as can be and at the same time enjoy their environment. But, today I thought we'd look at, some of what's causing this and then really wrap up the podcast with maybe how do we solve some of these issues. Okay, that makes some sense, Jim?
I do, and I'd like to, not that I'm here to correct you, Lou, but 5 is just what's probably being reported, right? And so when you look at the number of incidents that are across not just the NFL, but all leagues, arenas, and stadiums and events, it's seemingly kind of getting a little. Is it getting? I guess the question to the group is it getting out of hand? Is it something that is increasing, or is it just being covered more often? What do you guys think?
All of the above.
It's a great question, Jim. Yeah, go ahead, Mario.
No, listen, I think it's the attention people are making of it. And I think social media plays into a lot of this. is, 5, 10 years ago, there really wasn't a forum to share these experiences in real time. And now our fans are using that platform, whether it's TikTok or Facebook, to post their actions or the actions of those around them. And I think that's what's leading to this extra attention. The reality is, as facility managers, we've had these challenges for many years. Remember times when we used to control our giveaways and what can be thrown and what couldn't be thrown. Remember when alcohol used to be served or poured into cups, and now it's aluminum bottles. So the reality is the fan experience has changed, and how we manage our building has changed. The spectator behavior issue really comes down to our staff being able to manage them and to react to a situation and to prevent future. And I think that comes down to what Dan was talking earlier about COVID and potentially impacting how we recruit and how we train our people.
Yeah, Lindsay, what do you think on the social side of things? I mean, is it really just the operator's responsibility here, or is there something that we should be teaching as families and moms and dads and grandparents at home, and the psyche associated with just everyday behavior? Where does that responsibility come in?
Thanks, Jim. Well, I can't govern what's being taught at home on a normal basis every day, and everyone's going to run their families their own way. But what I can suggest is that we really focus on mental health and de-escalation and different behaviors that we can really work with the public and with our staff to teach them how to take behaviors that are escalating and apply really simple techniques to either identify when someone's having a mental health crisis and get them the help they need, or to do de-escalation techniques to really calm a situation down and diffuse that situation.
Yeah, I see, Dan. You're a guy that's involved in the security and the training of many different things and people, and certainly you've seen this in your environment, huh? I mean, talk to me a little bit about what's in the mindset of a fan that thinks it's just okay to throw that bottle on the court like you saw in that clip today.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting, and Lindsay brings up a great point. It's the idea that the de-escalation is great, but it's our own fans that are upping and they're escalating instead of de-escalating, and we talk about people, whether it's safe to be in our buildings or not, but it's the two parties that tend to be turned into 5 parties and 10 parties going at each other, and it escalates, and people aren't walking away from the problem. Maybe has something to do with kind of the divisive culture that we're living in, at least in this country right now, and people think that they can be not humans anymore. They don't have to treat their counterparts sitting next to them in a respectful manner, and it just escalates quickly. It's hard to respond fast enough. Staff can try and go in and de-escalate, but it's the parties that get engaged, they escalate quickly, and it's really hard to mitigate that kind of situation.
Darcy, go ahead, though. I think you were going to ask something here, but go ahead.
No, I was going to say, the whole area of authority, this political climate, I'll ask Mario, years ago, we had some law enforcement and we had our policing at stadiums, and we did what we could do to manage the environment. You think it's changed a lot today?
Absolutely. I think law enforcement generally have limited resources. And I think we see that in our numbers, and what we used to have or what used to be able to do our extra duties just don't exist. And the court system itself is backlogged. Look what COVID did. And so officers are reluctant to lay charges, knowing that the prosecutor is not going to go move forward with it. And the fans know that. And so, what's the point of telling them they're going to be charged criminally when they know that all they're going to get is a slap on the wrist and they're released? And how many times have you seen incidents where people are, whether it's on a field intrusion in a baseball game or a football game, and the person is out a few minutes later saying that all it was a fine? So I think it doesn't help us, but that ultimately, that's the only power that we have, is to rely on our law enforcement partners to help enforcement. But training is the key, and awareness and identifying those problem areas, and senior managers reacting to them by redeploying and looking at other situations to manage with it's all.
A perfect segue for you, Darcy. I think if you can talk a little bit about some of the training elements that you're employing or implementing in your world.
Right. Well, I mean, let's also look at one more part is like the platform for social issues. People are using a lot of these arenas, and a lot of these events to, promote their ideas. And, we've got people gluing themselves to floors, chaining themselves to backboards, all the different things that are going on. And we do a lot of investigations and try to preempt any of these type of events by identifying the subjects that belong to certain groups that are getting tickets to these games, and trying to forecast and mitigate any type of intrusion or any type of disruption of the game that will cause not only brand issues but safety issues, right? So we work a lot with law enforcement and investigative teams and a larger scale security groups to help with that and come up with solutions. And like Dan and Mario and Dr. Lou and yourself say, it's all about training. It's all about investing the time ahead, and the dividends and the return will be it'll far outweigh what you're spending in the time amount you're doing that.
Well, and there's no doubt that it's why people are doing the things that they're doing, and when they're doing it, it's obviously successful, right, Dan? I mean, when you look at the attention that some of these groups are getting, and the lack of accountability or a lack of punishment for that, for maybe a better term, talk to me a little bit more about that. And certainly Mario brought it up with the backlog of the courts, but are teams and leagues and cities and police departments, are they doing enough, do you think?
I mean,
it's a tough question, right? I'm not trying to throw those guys under the bus, but
it's very regional.
We got to do something different, it feels like to me.
Yeah, I mean, look, Mario brought up the field runner. Let's see, I pay a fine versus all of my Instagram likes and my exposure. Like, that's the mindset of these people. And Jim, we go to different cities, and you got law enforcement with their hands tied, versus some cities where they're actually supported by their prosecutors. So it's very difficult, as in the Bay Area. I mean, we do a lot of events out there, and that department, SFPD, I think they do a great job with the tools they're given, but their resources are limited. They're still down from the budgeting exercise when we decided that we shouldn't spend so much on police. So their resources are limited, and their hands are tied. The guys that are there, guys and ladies that are out there serving, they do a great job. But how much effort are you going to put into the points made when that the person that should be held accountable for their actions is not?
I wonder if there's any sort of implementation somewhere in and around the industry, or whether it's with leagues or teams, that's changing the focus, or is bold enough to change the focus, not just that it's our responsibility to take care of this and fix things, but I wonder if on a humanistic level, there's an effort, there's a teaching, there's a program, there's some sort of outreach that says, the behavior in the stands, one, it's not appropriate. And why are we treating each other this way, with a lack of respect and courtesy and all those things? But then something pops, a fight breaks out, a medical even pops out. And the first thing that the 30 people in and around the incident do is they take out their phone and they start videoing it. Now, are they videoing it because they don't want to get involved? Or are they doing it because they're hoping to get likes on their social media post, or a combination of the both? But it seems to me, not to date myself here, but back in the day, excuse me, people would engage. They would not get into the fight, but pull people apart and have some sort of involvement. Do you see that's not happening as much today? And if so, why do you think?
Well, it's not happening. People do want to be the video recorder instead of going and helping. But it's also, look, I've been on kind of the expert witness side of a number of these matters, and you see when you read through the depositions and the videos you look at, and you see a person that gets engaged in a small conversation that escalates so quickly and then they think it's over, and you get stuff like this. I
Right.
mean, come on.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
How much of it you think is entitlement? I paid, tickets to these types of events are not cheap anymore, right? Not that they ever were, but they're getting more and more expensive. How much do you think is involved in the, I paid for my ticket, I can behave however I want to? Lindsay, Darcy, and Mario?
Well, let me say this. I think
100%. I mean,
go ahead.
No, but I mean, people believe that like I paid for this seat and I can act like an asshole.
Yeah. I'm wondering, as we look back pre-COVID and now post-COVID, I wonder if this reflects post-COVID, the change in people's behavior. They're thrown back in this competitive environment, working from home, getting back in the office, the uncertainty here. You think that's part of it?
I mean, I do, Lou.
Yeah.
I think I've seen that, compared to where we were pre-COVID. I think a lot of our staff who had the experience, and again, training is the key. The ones who used that experience over years knew how to de-escalate, knew how to inject themselves in the early stages. That doesn't exist now, and employees are very timid. And all it takes is someone yelling at them and they back off. And I think that's where you see that, whether it's at a drive-through coffee station or McDonald's, and the arguments that you're seeing. That's true of our staff. And what we've noticed is the employees who are here 2 or 3 years after COVID are doing better because they have that experience. They also know the support mechanisms are in place that we provide them. But I think that's largely why fans behave the way they are, is they're still dealing with the sense of what are you going to do about it? And that's ultimately it.
Well, when you said, what are we going to do about it? I think we have to look at how do we be proactive in this environment, what we're talking about. Dan, a risk assessment for the event's probably number one step, huh?
Yeah, I mean, you're assessing what the profile of your event, right? Like, in Mario, you can speak to it better, but most baseball stadiums are seeing less than our NFL counterparts. But of this, right? It's more of a family and activity, and maybe playoffs changes that whole formula when games become more and more heated, or the outcome of the game has such an impact. But I think also we take a look at this, and we're looking at it from a stadium and arena perspective. Look what's going on in our airports. Look what's going on in our airplanes. Like, people just are not treating their human counterparts next to them with any respect, and it's almost daily now.
Yeah, Dan, the NFL did and is continuing, I think, doing a really, really good job of what we called, or they called, the respect campaign, right? And so where they mandated a couple hits each quarter, at least once a quarter, I think, throughout the game, that talked to the fans in the stands, right? Now, whether or not you're reaching all 70,000 fans, but I think it gave people an opportunity to pause for a second and say, look, this is who we are. This is who we're pulling together. Let's be respectful of not only each other, but our visiting team fans. So I really think the NFL is doing a good job. Mario, how do you think baseball's doing? And any other, not to put those guys on the spot, but any other leagues and entities, or any teams out there or leagues you're seeing that are doing a fantastic job that we might model something like that or expand upon it as we move forward into this new fiscal?
I think leagues as generally we're all facing the same challenges, and Major League Soccer is different than Major League Baseball, which is different than the NHL and the NBA. But all it takes is one incident, and then we're all asked to revisit our policies and our procedures. I think a lot of it comes down to each facility having a unified command structure where you're able to track incidents and try to determine what areas are your hotspots and the type of incidents that you have, and using that information for the next visit by that visiting team, much to what Dan was talking about. That really starts it. I mean, baseball, we play 81 games. And the reality is, a Friday night game might be dramatically different than a Tuesday night, but also depends on who your opposition is. And previous issues also will dictate how you staff the building accordingly. We all have a code of conduct. That's something that needs to be reviewed on a regular basis, and also your prohibited items. So we can do a lot of the legwork in advance, but ultimately that behavior element of what takes place is for us and our frontline staff to share that information, so we as managers know what the building is sounding like or feeling like, so we can anticipate that next crisis.
Hey, Jim,
Hey,
I think
Mario,
also along with that is policies and procedures. What do you have in place? All right. And what do you practice and train with in those policies, procedures? Do people, do they know the parameters? I mean, I spent 27 years in law enforcement. If there was an issue, we pulled it out early and got rid of it. So if there's a fan that's causing a problem, get rid of the fan early and often, and then you're setting the tone for everybody around you that's not going to be tolerated, right? Mm-hmm. And that fan does not come back in. It's easy to expel fans. With the things that we have today. So I think that's a big part of it, but also what we've seen is what we've done is creating these ERTs, creating 100 extra eyes and ears from the civilian side that know what to look for. And you know, it's a force multiplier, if you will. You've got a lot of extra people that has a little extra training that can let the people know if they see situations developing, because the police can't be everywhere all the time. In cases like this, they're more reactive than proactive, right? They come in, handle this issue, then get rid of the problem. Where if you can preempt this and set expectations, I think we might start having a better chance on better outcomes.
And Darcy, for the people in the group, I'll get to you, right, Lindsay, right, please, right after this. But just for the group, ERT stands for?
Emergency Response Team. It's a group of, we've developed it at a lot of places where it's like, think of a civilian responder, if you will, somebody with awareness. We do extra training in active violence, CPR, building evacuation, fire extinguisher use. It's the people that volunteer, right? They're a little higher level. They're not security officers. They're not police officers, but they're a high level responder that just gives you such an incredible better opportunity for a better outcome, because with just a little bit of training and you get that buy-in that they're part of a special team, now you've built an incredible response system where you get pride involved in it also.
Lindsay, you're up. Sorry about that.
Thanks. No problem. I just wanted to kind of add into some of the things Darcy was talking about, you know, this concept of the immediate responder, right? We know first responders, there are fire, EMT, police. And when we look at national response times, even if there is an event and they're in the building, to get from one course to another, up and down the stairs to the area where these things are happening, they can't be right there all the time. And so we need to put the responsibility on those who are working at the venues, as well as kind of onto the fans, to be responsible for their own safety and protection, as well as those around them. And I think it's really empowering to use this concept of the immediate responder, which are everyday people who have taken the time to become aware of what they can do in the event of an emergency. Not everyone's going to jump in and do CPR. And for some people, they go, you know what, that's just not for me. But I have no problem calling 911, or I have no problem directing the EMTs to where we're going. They just don't know how to respond. And I think that's where we see a lot of the cell phones come out. It's a nervous reaction of, I don't know what to do. I can't be helpful. I know how to, you know, get my phone out, and that's what they do. And we saw this with active violence for so long in these schools, right? An active shooter would come in and the kids would be videotaping each other instead of helping each other. Bleeding control really took off, and now we're seeing kids help each other in these emergencies. So I think it's on us too to change that culture a little bit, empower people with easy training, and give them options for response. You don't have to put your mouth on a stranger. You don't have to touch someone's blood, but know what to do to be helpful in emergency. And that's really what we've been pushing from our end.
I think that's fantastic. I guess what I'm trying to see is how best to roll that out amongst 70,000 people in an NFL stadium, or 50,000 at a baseball stadium, or in Dan's particular case, over 100,000+ at F1 this weekend. What are you seeing, and how? What kind of strategies have you seen teams, leagues, operators deploying as we hopefully push in this kind of direction moving forward?
So when we're talking about mass training, I think we have to take our big problem and make it small. We can't train 100,000 people in a day, although we'd love to in a perfect world, that'd be awesome. But we need to start with our core groups at the stadiums. We need to differentiate the levels of what people need to know. We have the level of the person who needs to be aware of how to react, right? That might be our temp workers that are at the arena or volunteers. Just very basic 10-minute intro. If this is what you see, this is what we need you to do as an immediate person. Then we have our next level up, who are responders, and they know skills and they know what to do to react. And then once we take this culture of accountability, then we bring it out into our communities, we bring it out into events that are being hosted at the arenas or by different organizations. After the CPR and AED use that was televised on national TV, now we see pop-up CPR events happening all over. Everyone feels that accountability of I need to know what to do, and we don't need to wait for a tragedy to start that accountability. We can create that culture in organizations like this by having these conversations and really starting these training programs and stepping up and doing it.
You know, Jim, I would chime in. We had this great conversation, I don't know, Lou, 2 years ago here in Las Vegas as we were coming out of the pandemic, and Jim, you sat on a panel with me. I think Mario, you might have been on it. Yeah. You know, and we talked about the things that Lindsay and Darcy are talking about, and the resources are the key, right? Like, how do we get the right resources to be consistently at our events? Trained, repeat, courtesy teams, ERTs, whatever you want to call them, because the fact of the matter is we came out of this pandemic and staffing is one of our biggest challenges still today, and the turnover of staff. So the short training, you know, modules that Darcy and Lindsay are speaking to, clearly very critical. But at the end of the day, are all of our venues putting in the dollars that it takes to really have these people trained up and get the repeat staff? You know, Mario, it's a challenge. If I ask you how many full-time staff versus, you know, kind of outsourced staff that you have, you have 81 games. It might be a little better. If I've got a Madison Square Garden with an arena with that kind of schedule, that's different, right? But not everybody has that schedule to be able to keep the same people employed every day.
No, and I think Lindsay would probably agree that in-person training for some of these topics are much better than a remote or online, because people don't appreciate or have the ability to talk to their coworkers about these situations. So moving back to in-person, I think, is one thing that we've tried to do, and we're seeing a benefit from it, versus the remote online training, which is basic for some roles, general information, but we need more specific hands-on. It's got to be back in person.
Yeah. Mario, what kind of technology are we using today to support managing of the crowd environment, such as texting and two-way radios? What are you doing now in your program?
Well, I think from our command center perspective, obviously it's a combination of a lot of different platforms. Social media monitoring in real time, it takes place in our command center. Our in-stadium texting service, whether it's ISS or Raven Controls, is another tool available to us. Having a texting service is great, two-way from our fans, but also from our employees. Being able to incorporate communication with an employee who may not have a radio, so some other device. I think ultimately it's information that we want to gather. And then obviously having a robust website for fans before they get here, and the Know Before You Go platform is a great way to alert them to certain behaviors, prohibited items before they get there to avoid. I think those are all different in the last couple of years compared to 10 years ago, but I think it helps us manage our crowd if we have that platform as another layer of enhanced security, that we know exactly where our hotspots are, and so we can react to those situations in real time.
Lou, I'm also a big fan of tabletop exercises and training in that particular format. I think is pretty valuable, and not to plug Dan, but I'll do it. I've worked with Dan on a number of cases where he and his team have been brought in to provide tabletop exercises where not only you're testing your readiness, your processes, the supervisory staff and above type folks, police and law enforcement and medical and fire and all those folks. But Dan, maybe you could talk a little bit about in the past where we tried to expand it into, some of the frontline staff too. So they had an understanding of what upper management might be dealing with. You're not going to, again, to Lindsay's point, you're not going to get out to, 3,000 people or 70,000 people, so to speak, but talk maybe a little about some of your experiences associated with tabletops for the frontline staff or managerial staff as well.
Yeah, it's and you pushed us kind of in this direction because we run a number of tabletops, whether they be Super Bowl related or for individual stadiums, and Jim came to me one time and said, you know what, we got to quit making sure that I'm the one that's doing the talking, right? So how are we going to get the exercise down to the manager level? And some of that has been taking that tabletop and getting more into your simulation type environment and saying, all right, here's a scenario or two. Now go break out and let's see who actually steps up and does the talking. And you find very quickly that there's some people that are going to lead as soon as the bosses are not in the middle of the conversation, and find out who those staff members are that are going to take the lead on the next steps and actions. And, I would say I get frustrated sometimes at some tabletops, and Jim's heard me tell the speech. Like when you're doing these things, it's that, what are your actions in the first minute, right? Because we tend to start talking about all the things we can do. And then you ask them, well, how long is that going to take? And we're 30 minutes down the road from when the incident or the communication took place. And I go back to the incident at the beginning of the season, and I correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think Miami was in New England, and we had like a single punch, and a Miami fan is no longer with us. Like I don't know what the escalation was before that. I forget, and Chris, you might have it, but you got to talk about what's happening the first minute when you're doing these exercises. What are your actions? And I think that's the key, because we can talk about what we can get done in 30 minutes, but the issue's already been escalated and it's out of our control.
Very well said. Very well said, Dan. Those first minute or two are very critical. I know, Lindsay, you're big on that. That first 5 minutes is everything, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's what we really try to teach in our courses is what can you do in those first few minutes before first responders arrive that can really make a difference? What are simple things? We try to take out those long algorithms of here's 25 steps or if this, then that, and we just simplify it into this is what you need to recognize and this is how you respond. It's very simple. Take out the guesswork, make people feel empowered, and then they're going to be able to respond. And Mario, to your point earlier, you're right. In-person and tabletop exercises, Dan, those are great. Those are advanced level. But for the majority of the people that are in these encounters, they need just very, very basic information to be able to be effective. And that's what we call our awareness courses. Even CPR, we've brought it down to CPR awareness, not even doing the skill, but just being aware of what it might look like and what your role might be in that. And there are effective ways when we look at adult learners now. It's not just the click through a PowerPoint or listen to somebody that's video recorded. There's a ton of different media. There's a ton of different research that's gone into how adult learners can retain information. And that's what I specialize in. So I really enjoy pulling on all these different multimedia resources, increasing engagement, and making these courses short, fun, and interactive, and also extremely cost effective so that it can be shared with everyone. So that's what Darcy and I spend all of our time on now is in real life, what did this look like? Because a lot of time training programs are created by boards that didn't necessarily do the skills and haven't necessarily been in the situations. And between his background in law enforcement and now managing on the private sector in mine and medicine, we really kind of give a lot of different flavors to how these scenarios might happen and how you can be an effective person that can respond.
Good. Yeah, and listen, Darcy, and I think that is a perfect example of this can get to the masses. This sort of training can get to your frontline staff, to your 2,000 and 3,000 people that are working the game, the food and beverage, the guest services, the parking attendants, the security guards. That group of people alone on most NFL stadiums or even baseball stadiums are 1,500 to 2,000 people. And there's an opportunity for you guys to develop. And I hope, Lou, maybe perhaps you'll put their contact information, somewhere where people can reach out and these folks can help each other and other teams and leagues. But talk about how you can do some of those training, whether it's in person training, as Mario talked about, or online, or other venues like this, where you can kind of talk a little bit about those programs and how you can reach those individuals, huh?
Right. There's a couple of ways. Number one, you got to make it simple. You got to make it easy. They got to be able to do it on their mobile devices. You want to talk about during onboarding for any employees, they should go through some basic scenario safety training and checking the boxes and getting their certifications. You should set up some type of annual training that's in the books because, like de-escalation, for instance, as in law enforcement, we get sued a lot. And the first thing they ask you, before you went hands on that person, or before somebody touched the person at the stadium and they tried to remove them from the incident, what did you do to try to de-escalate the situation? And what steps did you take? Oh, you didn't take any? All right, start writing some big checks. So what we try to do is we make it simple, easy, and fast, almost like, hey, all right, everybody, you showed up for work, you got your prep radio, you got your bleeding control kit. Let's do a quick 10-minute video recap on what your roles, responsibilities are today for safety. So it's reinforcing and relearning training, because for a lot of the people, it's not their everyday job. So it doesn't come as easily as it does for all of us. To take it a step further, even for the fans, you got season ticket holders that love getting emails to see what exciting events are coming up. Why not send little things out to the fans on expectations at the stadium for not only their safety, but the safety of the fans around them, and be, kind of unique and do things that nobody else is doing, even contacting, local media, expressing these are the things that we're doing, because your fans want to be safe at the event. I know when I'm there with my family and a fight breaks out, that's scary. That's scary for my kids to see it. And it's not really a family environment anymore when that's going on. So we've got a responsibility. And when they ask us at the end, did we do everything we possibly can? I think instead of just checking the boxes, we start laying out to senior leaders, these are the steps that we want to take. And we've teamed up with Dr. Lou and IIFX to create some incredible content here. That the de-escalation, our website is premiertraining.org, which we'll get out. But take a look at the website. Look at some of the new ways Lindsay has developed to train. The United States military brought her in to oversee the training, so she's got an incredible idea about new ways of training, short, impactful, and engaging. Right. And then obviously the last thing that I'm going to say, which Lindsay said, is it's got to be value. It's got to be a great value for the company, because we're training a lot of people. And I think we've got that covered also. We're excited to roll this out to everybody.
Yeah. Well, we're excited. We're going to talk a little bit about that in our next podcast. Jim, I think we kind of reached the end of our discussion today. And it's
I think you're right. And
very insightful.
You can do hours and hours upon this. Certainly don't want to belabor the point, but very insightful stuff. I will end on, sometimes operators and venues and leagues and teams, for that matter, are always sometimes making a choice between this kind of budgeted item and something else. But training, I've always been an advocate of, is not one that you can not make that choice on. So I think, Dan and Mario, I think you would agree, huh?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Well, listen,
Lindsay, if you can get on a flight now, I've got about 1,700 security guards and 1,500 guest services people that are going to go live on Thursday. So come on out.
Are you located somewhere warm? Because I'm in Michigan. It's pretty cold here. So a warm climate is pretty intense.
Las Vegas.
Oh,
yeah. But be prepared. It's 75 during the day and 40 at night at this time of year.
That's
we're going to be fine.
Well, he's certainly tongue in cheek. He'd be remiss if he didn't have these guys and gals ready. He'll be, and his team of Calvin Graber and the rest of his team out here will have these folks ready. But there's no doubt that you certainly could have provided an added benefit. But my man, I'm sure you're going to be ready, and look forward to working with you on that. So Lou, I think we come to the post, or we're going to post this our live stream to the IIFX YouTube channel.
Yep.
We'll also create some contact and some podcasts that are available, I think, on Spotify and Amazon, right?
Yes.
Google and other podcast sites. So look for those.
Yeah,
Look for
Google
those
and Apple and the other ones, and the other podcasts. Sure. Yep.
Yeah, for sure. So look for those, folks. Lou, I'll pass it up to you to wrap it up. But a strong thank you out to each of you for taking your time. I know you're all busy, but you're making a difference out there. And I think if we can just remember that while we have these folks in our custody of our care, as our old friend Russ Simons would say, it's an obligation, but it should be a privilege, right? So in how we're inviting people into our homes and into our venues, but it is incumbent upon us to make sure that these people are as safe as possible for when we bring our own families too. But again, thanks for the time that you put into this. Lou, I'll kick it to you.
Yeah, well, thank you, Jim, for co-hosting with this, and certainly a big thank you to all of you today, Mario and Lindsay and Darcy and Dan. Dan, good luck this weekend with the F1 project here. Please, folks, please hit the subscribe button right on the bottom there, and give us a thumbs up. How about that? A thumbs up would be great. We've discussed the issue, so let's look at the future here a little bit. Our next live stream will be December 6th, and we're going to look at emergency response best practices. So we're going to kind of carry on what Lindsay and Darcy are doing and getting into the emergency response concept for our next podcast series on December 6th. Again, remind everybody, please hit the subscribe button, give us a thumbs up. And remember, folks, be fan-centric. And thank you so much for a great podcast, and have a good day, folks.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good holiday, too. Be well.
Thanks, everyone.